Today's interview is with Dan Gandee. Dan's done a lot of stuff. He even played basketball against LeBron James, which is a pretty cool story that he shares. But he specializes in owner financing, which is a really cool strategy. So if you don't know much about it or you want to learn more about that, stick around for today's interview. He gets in depth in about how to make that work. So stick around for all of that. As always, like and subscribe on Wrestling with Real Estate, the YouTube channel. Go to the WWRE podcast and give me a 5-star rating and write me a review. A good one, please, because it really does help us build this platform as we're trying to grow and continuously give you guys some great content. So please go ahead and do that. And I'm looking to speak to as many of you as possible. If you're interested in real estate, whatever capacity that is, I'd love to get to know you, see if there's any way whatsoever I can help you. So go to the link in the description down below, or go to wrestlingwithrealestate.com and sign up there. But before that, enjoy today's awesome interview with Dan Gandee. Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we're joined by Dan Gandee. Hey Dan, how you doing, man?
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure to have you, man. I'm happy we were able to make this interview happen. What do you want to give people? Sorry, man, my mouth got in my way there for a second. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself, your current, what your background is, what your current focus is, and what you've been up to?
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate it. So yeah, background is I grew up in the Midwest. We were just having a conversation about this. I grew up in the Akron-Canton area. Just a middle class life, nothing crazy. Played sports as a kid, loved to golf, play basketball. Funny fact was I used to scrimmage LeBron James and play him in basketball and football, and kind of watched his rise to fame. And so, yeah, man, it was a great place to grow up. I went to Kent State University, go Flashes. Saw a few NFL football players kind of get out, spread their wings from that program. But I graduated in 2008 with a degree in advertising, and like the economy was just like had taken a complete shitter. It was bad. And so it was either move 3,000 miles away, or New York or Chicago and work in the ad agency world, or go back living at your house and hope and pray you can find a bar job. So I buckled down and saved up some money, man, and I threw my dog in my car, and I moved 3,000 miles away to the Silicon Valley in 2010. I had no place, slept on a couch, and I was like, if I'm going to make this happen, I'm going to make this happen and do it. And so fast forward, I just had incredible opportunity in the Silicon Valley to, my first job is a famous landscape architect that built like most of Pebble Beach Country Club's landscaping. Hired me to run his nurseries and help him with some landscape marketing. And then that led into, real estate flippers and contractors coming in and getting plants and soils and amendments, and got recruited out of there by a guy who ran the electrical contracting, the general contracting, landscape contracting. He had like 4 or 5 different businesses, but that partnership basically grew a construction company to about $3 million in annual revenue. And I knew that real estate was always in my blood. I grew up with my grandfather, and not to bore you guys with a crazy story, but my grandfather owned a construction business and had a couple rentals, and it just was always in the back of my head, like, how can I get into real estate? And the construction company and working for real estate developers and flippers, and it came to a point where I wanted to shift focus into real estate. And there's a gentleman named Brett Jennings. He's like one of the top 0.01% of production. He does over 100 million in sales. And he brought me on as director of operations. And that was my first, I went from 0 to 120. It wasn't like I just got my real estate license and then sold a few homes. I went into a top performing brokerage, and it was a short stint, but I learned so much and got connected to a lot of people. And I knew that I wanted to get into real estate and take this eventually back into investing and getting my, not just working from somebody, but creating my own value and career. And so fast forward, 3 or 4 years later, I started working. I slid into the DMs on an Instagram post to the CEO of a company called Liftoff Agent, and we've been now working together for about 4 years now, 3.5 years, and we're the real estate industry's #1 positioning agency, i.e., we help agents, brokers start to really look at their marketing and differentiate themselves, niche down, create good IDX websites and marketing sales funnels. And so with that experience, it allowed me to see what hundreds of top 1% producers were doing. So on the residential side, a lot of these brokers were investors. And so, in all of that, I just was like, you know what, I'm going to do this. So, with my experience about 4 years ago, me and my business partner joined up for forces, and we started a company called Sharks Holdings, or Flip Sharks. And yeah, man, we've been doing creative financing deals, owner financing deals, rehab projects, rental properties. It's like a 7-day a week, blood in, blood out type of thing. Like, I live and breathe it, man. And just as of recently, it just kind of took a complete full circle. I was trying to get vertically integrated so that we could run a brokerage, run the investment firm, run the long-term hold. And I started a real estate brokerage team, the Exit Agents, with my business partner, and we slid over to eXp Realty thanks to a gentleman named Ricky Kuruth, who's like one of the #1 real estate coaches in the country. So, to kind of give you some full context, this all happened because of relationships and trying new things out, taking jobs that I really didn't want at first, and building networking and just kind of slowly easing my way into real estate. But if I would have known what I know now, probably at 18 would have got my license or started investing. So yeah, that's kind of my life story, and it's kind of an interesting one because a lot of people just go to college, go get a job, have kids, and I've been kind of like that constant pursuit of building wealth and trying to create a life that is designed by me, not by somebody else. So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's one of the main things I love about real estate is, like you said, right, you have the control of yourself, right? You're not waiting for someone else to make decisions for you, right? You take that control yourself, right? I love that. I got to ask you, and I asked you off air, but like I got to ask you again for these people, right? Like, what kind of crazy athlete was LeBron James? Like, you said he played against you in football, right? And basketball. So he would dunk on you in basketball and then just run all over you in football as well. Is he just like a freak? Like, was there anyone else that was close to him at that age, or was he just that much of a freak?
Physically, like his build and his development was like 2 or 3 years. He was like playing against a kid that was maybe a sophomore or junior All-American in college when he's like a freshman and sophomore in high school. So I remember one year he was at the University of Akron's Nike basketball camp. They sponsored a summer league camp, I believe it was, and it was like first scrimmage, first game, first play was an alley-oop to him, and I was covering him, and that's just like, you talk about being able to swallow your pride. Like, I consider myself a decent basketball player, but I wasn't an all-star. And you just can't compete with somebody that has that potential. And I remember that parlayed into high school. He had the first high school televised basketball game. I think it was at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland. And I went to that. And yeah, man, it's just the power, the tenacity, the energy that he brought to the game was something that, I know Northeast Ohio had never seen. And, still to this day, from Miami to the Lakers, I still support him, man. He's an icon in our local area. He's given back. He's redeveloped, and he invested himself in projects and creating, making Akron, Ohio a better place. And I think that's all what it's about. I mean, it's not just about making money or you know, being famous and everyone knowing you. He really is somebody that I think that cares, and no matter if you don't like him on the court or not, he's a good guy. So that's my LeBron James story.
Yeah, he seems like a special person, right? Like, so obviously physically, like he was a special, he had those gifts, but seems like he's a special person in terms of who he is as well, right? You know, just like the mindset and the like you said, he's a good person as well, right? I think he behind that all the success as well.
Yeah, it's been good to watch him, and it gives people. And I come from Ohio, man. Like, it's Ohio State and it's Michigan and it's the Browns, and with the Browns, it's like loss after loss after loss. And he was the one thing that brought that energy of, hey, we're winning. Other than outside of the tribe in the late '90s. But yeah, Cleveland sports needed him. If it wasn't for him, man, we might not even have a basketball team. So
That's crazy.
yeah.
That's also interesting as well, that you always had an interest in real estate because of your grandfather. You always wanted to, because obviously going to Silicon Valley and kind of doing what you did out there is a little bit different to being in real estate, right? Even though you ended up sort of working for a landscaping company, it's a little bit different. But you always had that burning desire to get into real estate because you could. What was it about real estate though? Did you see your grandfather's success? Did you see the lifestyle that he lived? What was it, you think?
With him, it was he was an entrepreneur. He worked for himself. So that was the first thing, is that time freedom, that ability to manage their own schedule and be able to, be self-reliant. But I remember it was like 5, 6, 7 years old. He brought me out to this one property he owned over in East Akron. And I remember being like, Grandpa, like, what are we doing? He's like, this tenant won't get out. Like, I tried to evict them. They destroyed the house. Like, I just want you to show you what goes wrong with real estate investments and rental properties, so you can have a better understanding of, like, if you ever do this, what to prevent. And so, we cleaned out the house. We like, it was destroyed. Like, and that's part of the reason why my parents never got into it. Like, they weren't interested. Like, they saw the horror stories of investing. I try to take those bad experiences and turn them into, like, how do I organize an operational system so that never happens? How do I manage that asset correctly? How do I screen tenants so I can prevent that? But how can I also provide affordable housing that's fair and honest, that's doesn't cater to that type of clientele? And to be very honest, like, he owned a gas station, he owned a dairy mart, basically a convenience store, and he didn't own the business. He only owned the real estate. And I would always ask myself, like, Grandpa, like, how did you acquire all these properties? And he was just like, one by one by one. It's not a fast game. It's somebody that's in it for the long haul. And this year marks the last year. My parents finally liquidated the last property. Part of me was sad when I got that call, and they're like, yeah, we sold the gas station. And I was like, that was grandfather's last investment property. Like, you should have told me. Like, I would have possibly bought it just for just for some, just to have a piece of what he was a great influential character. I mean, he was a Italian guy. His grandmother was straight from Sicily. Like, he was first generation American, fought in World War II, lost both of his brothers. It was like Saving Private Ryan. And he was if he had not brought me to an investment property, gave me a lawnmower to mow rental properties, I would not be in real estate right now. That it's just those small, I just want everyone to kind of understand this, like, these small little periods of your life where you experience something and then it dominoes 10, 15, 20 years later. You can never, it shapes and molds you and how you what you draw interest in. So it was never about money, man. Like, a lot of people get in this business because they want to be a real estate broker and sell a bunch of houses and drive Ferraris. Other people want to get into multifamily, make a bunch of money. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, it's wealth building and creating time freedom and having that financial freedom is great. But when you come from a place where it wasn't about money, it was about running a business 9 to 5, creating that long-term asset, it is what it is. It's truly cool. So
absolutely. So what was your first ever investment then?
Great question. It was a manufactured home on 3 acres with an ADU.
Okay.
And it was a trust situation where a son had basically inherited the property from his parents. So there was absolute mess with the paperwork of the trust. Like when he sold us the property, technically he didn't even own the property yet. It hadn't even transferred to him yet. But I saw the potential. So one thing is land in Oregon is extremely rare. It's hard to find. So if you can get anything over, 1, 2, 3 acres in some place where it's secluded, like people are trying to move out of the cities and they want to, so you already have land demand. But that deal, I think he wanted 250,000 for it. I ran the numbers on it, did an inspection, and I negotiated a $200,000 purchase price at 5% interest for a 20-year note with 10,000 down.
Wow.
And moved in renters, rehabbed the ADU, and it grosses me $28,500 a year now. So, I mean, in my debt service on it, it's like, so I got about 150,000 in equity in it, and I have it runs at it's like a 7 or 8 cap, so it's good. I mean, it's what you want in this market in the West Coast, especially from San Francisco to Seattle. Like, if you're looking at holds, like $100 to $150 a door is like the most you're gonna get on any type of like acquisition in the last 5 to 10 years, because the purchase price is so high. So any way we can look at negotiating great terms, negotiating owner financing, shout out to my business partner, Ed. We've been able to build a reputation about owner financing that has allowed us to, I'm teaching a continuing education class at the Rental Owners Association to like 3,000 landlords about it. So, 90% of the deals in my portfolio are owner financed. I haven't even actually used the bank in the last 16 months. So
that's the dream for most people right there, right? So, if you can, owner financing is a seriously powerful tool if you can use it right? But it has to make sense with the deal. So run us through, right, how you guys have been able to do that, because owner financing is, for a while it was a buzzword. It's kind of gone away, I feel, a little bit lately, because I think pricing is just, and the market's so hot, right, that it doesn't always, sellers can sell, right, and they can get whatever price they want. A lot of times they'll sell owner financing before to get their price, or if they're having trouble selling. But how have you guys been able to build a portfolio based on owner financing?
That's a great question. You brought some of it up. When the market is hot, interest rates are just rock bottom low. Owner financing is not the first vehicle of the seller's choice, right? They can liquidate, they can take the capital gains exposure, and they can roll that property or 1031 it. Like there's all these options, but as inventory gets lower and lower and lower, and I think the buyer demand is still as hot as it has been, the first thing in this process is having ridiculous marketing. So cold calling, text messaging, RVMs, setting up sales funnels, driving for dollars, building a database based upon distressed properties and identifying those and having eyes on them, but then turning it around and being able to negotiate. So it's first marketing, second negotiation, 3 really packaging up the deal in a way that if you just can't be in a short term. It's not a house flipper's mode of attack. It's a, I was on Austin Linney's podcast a few weeks ago, and he's like, not many investors talk about building a hold portfolio. And I said, if you can create it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars over a quick amount of time. It's acquiring those assets one by one by one by one, and then liquidating or cash out refining when you need to. But that negotiation has been the biggest tool. First, marketing and acquiring those properties and having those conversations. And that's a lot of that is experience has been working as director of operations and marketing and real estate brokerage. So I kind of reverse engineered it. Like, I'm still going to go find listings, but how do I find investments? And so the second thing of that has been, once you have a conversation with somebody, being able to show them the value in owner financing. There's a bank on every single corner in the United States for a reason. That's because every single transaction, they own 33% of it. They finance that house, that construction, that commercial building, that apartment complex. And when you can tell a seller, like, hey, look, the reason banks are so wealthy is that they're playing the interest. They're making the deals happen. And if you can turn around and play not only the bank but also the seller, even if you're going to pass away, you're an older gentleman or woman, and you're 70, 80 years old, like, what the number one question we get in owner financing, not to just jump all over the place, is what happens when I die? And I always say it's like an annuity. It's your kids are going to get that mailbox money until that term is over. And when that bloom comes up, by that time I have enough equity to 9 times out of 10 to not ever take it to a bank. So, the average number one golden tool you have to have if you want to negotiate owner financing is having the most badass presentation when you go into the first conversation. But when they give you that price and you've done your research, being able to show a net to seller, hey, this is what we can do. We can sell it on the market. I'm a broker. We can sell it on the market. You can pay my realtor fees. You can pay the closing costs. You can pay your capital gains or not pay your capital gains. And at the end of the day, you're going to get this much equity out of the deal. Or we can owner finance it. You can sell it directly to me. I'll give you the price you want at the terms that I want. And at the end of the day, over that 20-year term, this is the payout. And people literally will look at those numbers and be like, wow, I can get $160,000 today, or I can get $350,000 in 20 years. And I always ask the second question. First question is like, what happens when I die? The second question is, what are you going to do with that money? And if it's going to sit in the bank at like CD rates, even at 6%, 5%, you're like triple, quadruple yield. And so, those have been some of the tools that we use, and having badass contracts, having a really good attorney, and being able to talk through the deals and show people the value. The first deal we ever did there, that manufactured home, the first thing when we said, what are you trying to get out of this? He said, as much money as possible. And I said, no, if I could hand you a monthly payment every month, like what would that golden number be? And he's like $1,000 a month. And I was like, done. We can get that. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be scared and looking at the deal and being able to walk away. But I've turned on market residential transactions into that only say on the MLS, they'll say cash conventional. That's it. No owner financing, no WC, whatever it is. I've literally called the listing agent and said, when your seller wants $85,000 wired to them, 6% interest, and I'll buy it for $40,000 more than what's currently listed for, give me a call. And they'll say, no way, they'll never do it. And they'll call me back like 3 weeks later. So it's really being able to be a mathematician to how much time, how much appreciation, how much cash flow. And if it's, inevitably I love interest only owner financing. But I'll amortize it all day long if it means that I can cash flow within reason and be able to look at the market and be able to play that card. Because if you bought an apartment complex or a duplex in Eugene, Oregon, from 2005 to 2015, you bought it for about 175,000. They're selling for 400 grand. So 10 years, you just made 300 a quarter, 300,000. in appreciation. I mean, stack up as many deals as you possibly can. So we do that. And the other thing that we do is we will owner finance properties out. We don't do many each year, but we'll do a few every year, owner finance to other investors typically. And those have been just mailbox money. Like it's like owning a rental without any of the bells or whistles. So that's been primary our owner financing.
Yeah, I love that. You know, it really is fascinating to me. I get why you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I get why you would own a finance a purchase, but why would you own a financing a sale for people who don't know?
It's really if you acquire a property and you're going to rent it out anyways, selling it on owner financing is it's like the cherry on top. I just did it with a mobile home. We purchased a mobile home from a probate lead. He wasn't interested in holding on to it. And I found out from the park management that I couldn't rent it. And like I was about to walk away from the deal. And my business partner always kind of slapped some sense into me because I'm always looking for, more units, right? And so he was like, hey, just FYI, like I think we could purchase this cash and then turn around and owner finance it, because at mobile homes, the number one thing is most people can't get a loan. Like if you're in that low price point and a bank won't finance that property, it's probably because you have bad credit. It's probably because you may not have the down payment money to put down on a stick-built residential house. But the third thing is that usually you're in that age bracket where you're kind of like winding down. So who's pulling out huge 20-year loans at 55, 65 years old? And so I went out and did some marketing and found a buyer. And I was like, hey, if I can make this work. And it was a veteran. And so we bought it from a veteran and I literally sold it to a veteran. And I felt so great about that because I was like, these people were living in a mobile home or they're actually living in an RV and they had some down payment money, but they just couldn't get approved. And so those, like, I want to let everybody know that part of your investing motive should be helping people. You can't help people all the time. Like there's always that profit first or that business first mentality. But when you can look at a deal and say, hey, like there's higher risk here and there's not much upside, but I can help people out and I can get some mailbox money every month. Like, is it worth my time? I get $500 for 10 years. So it's worth my time. So that's one of the benefits. And the second benefit is when you play the bank, you need to foreclose on that asset. But if they don't own deed to that property, it's basically like a repo. It's like a tow truck showing up for a mobile home. Like, hey, just FYI, like you got to move out. Like I own this, you've defaulted. So that's just another perk to it. And the third thing is you always want to, when you're owner financing out, you're not playing property manager. You're not getting the repair calls. You're not having to pay the insurances and taxes on the property. You're essentially paying the bank. And, we don't do a lot of them, but when there's the right storm and the right scenario and it makes sense for everybody and we can help somebody, we'll do it. But in the transition of everything, I just want to let a lot of the bigger investors know that I ran into this guy who used to owned like, I can't even give you the exact number, but he owned tons of doors, driving a Bentley in the Silicon Valley. I met him at a Starbucks. And this guy was probably about 85 years old. And he goes, you know what? In the life cycle of a real estate investor, he goes, you know what we do at my age when we get to this level? And I said, what? He goes, we owner finance every single property we have before we die. We don't sell them and liquidate. We just owner finance them out. And he goes, I get interest, I get tax shelter, I have all the assets are still tied to me. And when they pay that off at the purchase price 20, 30 years from now, and my kids have this, like he's like, I have millions of dollars in property owner financed. And I was just, that was like an aha moment for me. And 5 years later, I just started applying. So um, that's just the life cycle of, and that guy was a developer. He had already done the building shopping centers and homes and done all that. And now it was just like acquire, owner finance to other investor groups.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah. And going back to what you were saying about marketing, right? Are you marketing to a certain type of tenant? Is there a certain type of, not tenant, certain type of owner, a certain type of person? Because it would seem to me like you need some motivation a lot of times for that seller financing to work. Are you guys marketing to that type of person?
yeah, I think in the marketing sequence of things, I started a consulting agency, Days on Marketing, a few years back, and it's kind of a play on word, Days on Marketing. And one of the first things I always say to my consulting clients is that you start with the data. So I'll pull like everything owned over 25 years, free and clear. Then I'll separate all the data. What's in a trust? What's in an LLC? And who are all these random people's names? And the random people's names is who I start with, because the random people's names are not, this is not a ploy on or a attack on their intelligence, but they didn't put it in a trust and they didn't put it in an LLC. So now I know how to skip trace them. And so you can still skip trace LLCs and figure out whoever owns trusts. I'm not saying that you can't, but you start with that data and you work backwards. And that's where you see the Mom and Tina Smiths and all the different people where you can reach out to them and say, hey, you've owned this property for 20 or 30 years. Are you planning on, passing that inheritance down? Are you planning on liquidating at death? I'm the most non-pressure real estate broker in the country. If you're ever interested in possibly selling, like just give me your email address, read my emails from time to time. And when that time comes up or you want to have a conversation down the line 5 years from now, give me a call. At least allow me to interview or have a potential discussion about it. And that's led to a lot of different, nurturing that data. But to get back to your question, first, always lead with who owns these properties free and clear. Because if they have a note, you're not going to do a wrap. You're not going to subject to an owner finance transaction 9 times out of 10. You're not going to be looking for the people that are extremely distressed from a tax default purpose, or it's typically the investor that is winding down, or they're tired of being a landlord, or laws have changed like they have here in Oregon. And also you can't be shooting for 50, 100 door, 200 door complexes. You got to be looking for the 3s and 4s and 5s and 10s and the duplexes. Start with the little investors, because the little investors are the same ones that own 18 duplexes. A lot of people are repetitive in this business. So it starts about targeting, figuring out who those people are. And then the second thing is, when you reach out to them, is not sounding like the average wholesaler or investor, which is like, do you want to sell? No, you don't. Cool, click. You have to treat it like a real estate brokerage business, which is like, I just want to let you know who I am. Let me send you some more information, and let me just text you a video so you can tie a name to the face. And when that time comes, at least know that I'm available to have a conversation about it. And that's, to be very honest, like that's what's attracted a lot of my cash buyers to me. I just got off the phone with a guy down in LA. He has like 100-unit apartment complex. I've been in a real estate broker for only a short amount of time, but when I have a property, it's like, oh, open this email list and play the reverse wholesaling game as a broker to guys that I know are liquid. So that's been a big beneficial part, is kind of knowing how to navigate and using that to your advantage when you talk to sellers. Like, hey, if you don't want to owner finance, no problem, but at least let me try to sell this off market, or we can put it on the market and see what happens. So you got to run your investment business with bits and pieces of different other types of real estate investing, from multifamily to wholesaling, and pull all those marketing strategies together. And to really hit the nail on the head, man, if you can't negotiate in this business, like, get out. That's the number one thing. Negotiating and being able to have conversations with people, understanding these four things. There's four different types of triggers. There's financial trigger, there's a logistical trigger, there's an emotional trigger, and there's a status trigger. And what I mean by those is, I'll give you an example of each. A status trigger is they're getting divorced. Something's changing with their life status, or their company's going bankrupt. Now, there's some overlap there. Financial trigger, distress, can't cover their mortgage, bad property management and tenants and not cash flowing now. So you got logistical triggers, which is I need to move to New York City because my job changed. I need to sell my rental properties. Or I don't want to move. I don't want to sell yet because I don't want to pack up everything and deal with the logistics of actually physically having to uproot myself and move. And so when I look at all these different triggers, when you go into negotiating and knowing this business is psychology, why is somebody calling you to sell, or why are you talking to somebody and they're potentially going to ever owner finance to you or ever even sell to you or have you list their property? And I try to get right down to it. What is that trigger? What is the action plan that I can provide? And if I can't provide that action plan, or if it's not a property that I'm interested in, how do I turn that around and refer it out to somebody that's going to solve their problem? So at least they remember me as somebody that helped them. And Barri, I can tell you, there's been like dozens of transactions where I've literally been like, I'm not interested in your property, but call this person. And then I'll call them back a few months later and they'll be like, oh, I want to thank you so much. Like, you just connected the dots. And I was like, yeah, because that's what we should do in this business, instead of the opposite, which is like be all enemies. So that's given us a lot of business as well. We have a lot of house flippers that'll throw us deals because they can't close on them. I have a lot of real estate brokers, my own competition in my own market, that'll literally call me and say, hey man, I went to a listing appointment. Like, they have no equity. Like, there's no way they can pay a commission. Like, can you and your partner drive out there and see what you can do? And those relationships and helping each other and leading with value has really helped us.
Yeah, I think, like you said there, right? It's the abundance mentality as well, right? But it's also like, if you're not going to do a deal, you might as well send it someone else's way as well, because if you send someone a deal, you're building that relationship as well, right? The person that you send the deal, and also the person that's needing to sell, they're going to remember you. Maybe they have an uncle who's selling a property or whatever it is, right? That's how you build it, right? That's how you build that community that is going to help you as well. So I love that. How are you having trouble? Is your owner financing strategy having more trouble now? As we mentioned, as the market hotter up, interest rates are getting lower, or are you finding just as much success as you ever had, do you think?
We've found more success in this market based upon a few things that have happened in our own individual climate. So with the moratorium, with rental eviction freezing, you have a bigger opportunity to be able to showcase why that is important to owner finance the properties now. Especially with listing investment properties. Like, I have a duplex right now that we were liquidating a lady's investment portfolio, and she has this duplex and it was tenant occupied. And the only eviction that we could perform was if a buyer was going to occupy it. And I told her, you're in a very interesting time right now where most people, you buy or sell these investment properties and they buy them and keep the tenants in there, maybe raise the rent, do some upgrades or value add. But we're seeing more owner financing happening because as the rental rules get tighter and tighter and tighter, and the rental increase, we were at a 9.9, I think, and now we're down to like a 9% rental increase cap. What that's done is essentially, if you had less than favorable market rents, it's going to take you like 5 years of corrective increases to get back up to where you should be. And so when I go out to a listing, a lot of times, like, owner financing is awesome for them if you're going to just buy the property and keep the tenants in there and do the solution, value add plan over time, because there's no disruption to the tenants. You may be doing one property inspection. It's not contingent upon an appraisal. You're not having multiple showings in a lockbox and people knocking on the door and asking questions. So that disruption to the tenants is what pisses off tenants, and then they don't want to pay rent or things go sideways. And then the transaction is not a guarantee unless it's a cash purchase. So I always try to advise my clients that, be open to owner financing if you have those capabilities, because an investor might just want to swoop it up and slowly raise the rents and hold on to that asset. And it could be a win-win for everyone. So the one point I wanted to bring up today is that don't sell properties to just put them on the market and waste your agent's time or other investors' time. Like, the whole point of selling is to sell. So one of the biggest things I see in a lot of markets is that an investor will put a property out with like a GRM that's like 2 times what the other market. They'll have a cap rate at like half of what everyone is, and they'll throw a listing out, and people will go look at it, and it just doesn't pencil, and it wastes everybody's time. So you're better off to price your property appropriately, get multiple offers, possibly over asking, and be able to sell that property when the time is right. That's one of my biggest pet peeves in this market is when I see overpriced investment properties that don't valuate, because the only buyer that can buy them is cash buyers, because they don't have any DSCR coverage. So no lender will look at the income valuation and be like, oh, let me just lend this property that doesn't pencil or cash flow. And so you have a bunch of cash investors that start writing lowball offers, and it just wastes everybody's time. So that's why owner financing is a sexier approach to lower that price and be able to be a happy medium between, unrealistic purchase price and what you can get over time. So that's how I look at it.
Do you have trouble? I know you're an agent and a broker yourself, but do you have trouble with other agents? Because obviously a lot of agents, their main concern is getting their commission, right?
Yep.
With owner finance, especially if they're owner financing all of it, how do you explain that to the agent? Because I'm sure a lot of them are worried that they're not going to get their commission with that, right?
Yeah. So if I'm going to list a property with owner financing, I'll always make sure that in the listing agreement, the BAC, the buyer agent commission is included and advertised, like 2.5%, 2%, 3%, depending on what market you're in or what type of property. Because one of the perks usually with owner finance off market is you don't have to pay the realtor fees. But if I'm going to list your property and allow that type of financing to be deployed, a lot of times you need that buyer agent that has the other long list of liquid investors that are willing to purchase at that purchase price. So it's actually more beneficial. Like the whole FSBO argument, like I'm an investor, I can FSBO everything. I totally get it. Like I got a lot of flipper friends that do it all the time. But when you have a really good broker who knows a lot of really good brokers, the difference is like 90 days of your time or 3 days of your time. And I think that's what I try to tell a lot of the owner financing sellers is that, hey, like if we're going to owner finance this, let's do it so that we get into contract in 3 days. We get the paperwork to escrow. Like, let's get this started. Because the longer you owner finance, the more money you're going to make. And the less phone calls, emails, texts that I'm going to have to go back and forth, the million DocuSign emails you're going to have to do. Like, let's price it accordingly to sell so that we get a one and done approach. And so, yeah, if you're going to sell it with owner financing on market, like you gotta be open to that 5% or 6% in commission you may be able to have to pay from a advertising it on the market. So not to go in the weeds here, but I see a lot of apartment complexes on LoopNet, like tons, 3, 4, 5 cap in this market. And I always say, like, I'll look at days on market, they're like 187, 350. And I'm like, there's no point of sitting the property on the market. Like, if it doesn't have financing on it and it's owned by, owned free and clear, put it on the market. You have a $2 million property, put it on the market for $1.75 million at 5% interest with a 30-year AM. and do a 15-year balloon, and you want so it's a 1.75, you want 175,000 down or 300,000 down now, your buyer pool just opened up tremendously because you're not requiring a 20 to 25% down, where people aren't, unless you're a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, or some big CEO that can just like write a check for 400,000 or 500,000 to start the owner financing. So I always say with owner financing, don't make a ridiculous down payment requirement. If to me, if it's more than 15%, I'll just go to a bank and get a better interest rate. Yeah, I'm going to pay loan origination fees and have to go through a slew of appraisals, but a good healthy 10% down at a purchase price where you've elevated it and you have a good interest rate, dude, you can sell those apartment complexes like hotcakes. And banks are about that slow money. That slow money is what made them wealthy. The quick money, it's awesome and you can do other things with it, but it depends where you're on the market. If it's the top of the market, like what are you going to do with that money now? Because now you're going to buy at the top of the market. So it's better to, owner finance at that point.
Yeah. What would you say to people that say, well, if you're only putting 10% down, right, on owner financing and you're paying a high interest rates and you over leveraging and you taking risk, especially as well if you're giving them whatever price they want as well, right? What would you say to those people?
It's a simple calculation against what the appreciation in that market is, what the market rents are doing. So if you're seeing market rents like just stagnating and not going anywhere, yeah, like you should only over leverage yourself. It's just like buying a car and driving off the dealership and they're asking if you want gap insurance, right? That over leverage period should only be like the first 2 to 5 years, because you've done the math in this market. Even if we go, let me back up. My business partner always says this: if you can't weather one downturn, don't buy it. And what he means by that is like, you may overpay, you may not cash flow that much, you may not be able to do as much value as you wanted to do it. But if you can weather one 5-year cycle, 6-year cycle, and at the back end, it starts swooping back up, that's where you're going to make the money. I mean, we've seen it. Silicon Valley, the first, that couch that I slept on, the lady asked me, you can buy this property from me for $495,000 in 2010. And I had a job making like $20 an hour hourly, no benefits. I didn't have a down payment. And I was like, there's no way I could get a loan for this, but I appreciate the offer. If I would have bought that property, that same house, $1.350 million 10 years later, more than doubled. And that's what I try to tell everybody when you're owner financing, that ability to weather the cycle, to say, hey, I'm going to put some time and money into this. If you can take this business and you can treat it like it's slow money, it's great strategy, it's about acquiring assets, it's about creating great terms and being able to hold real estate. That's what my friend's dad used to always tell me. It's not a race to whose big bank account's the biggest. It's about who can hold the most real estate the longest. And I think that's what gives you leverage.
But what about being over leveraged now in this current market, right? There's, there might be, who knows what's going to come next, right? But there could well be a downturn pretty soon, right? You might not have had a chance to increase the rents, to increase the value or anything at that point. Could that be a serious issue right now, you think? It
could be a serious issue, but you have to, it all comes back to macroeconomics. So what happens in the cycle of a downturn? When pre-foreclosures and foreclosures start happening, the rental market actually gets larger. So as the economy and people start exiting their houses, the rental market, where do they go? They can't afford anything. So what are they going to do? They're going to immediately go to rent. So the multifamily investor, from the first 6 months to the first 3 years after a significant downturn, is actually in a better spot. They have more demand. So as long as let me be honest with you, as long as you can cover your debt coverage, you can cover your insurance, you can cover your taxes, and you can manage it with property management, If you owned a 250 unit apartment complex and you were making $25 a door, but you could hold on to that and say, you know what, I'm going to write off a loss, write off a loss, write off a loss. Bam, here it starts going back up. Boom, boom, boom. That's all you have to look at it. Too many, a lot of people get into this business have a lot of cash, and so they look at it like, hey, it's not like a blue chip stock where like I bought it for $75 and now it's worth $1,000. This business, like, let's be honest, 30, 40, 50 years ago, like the people that are becoming millionaires with real estate is because they owned it for 20, 25 years. So that's what I try to tell everybody, but there is always that risk. But with risk comes reward, and with patience comes profit. That's what I like to tell everybody. But yeah, it's a valid concern.
Yeah, you want it to be a calculated risk, right? You like you said, you like the market, you like the property, you like the area, you like, everything that goes along with it, right? You don't just do it. And I'm sure that's another point, is that you don't want to do every owner financing deal that you can. Just because you can own a financing deal doesn't mean that you should, right? Because there are some bad owner financing deals, right?
Yeah, I passed over like, a good 40 to 50% of them that have offered that, at least that strategy. And that's a lot of this came from, I have a really close best friend from back in Ohio, and his dad was a real estate developer. And he used to tell me, like, I buy dirt and I turn it into millions of dollars. But buying dirt is a risky business. I have to hold on to that dirt for a long period of time, and then I got to put money on verticals and utilities and development, and then I got to build homes on debt service. Basically, I have to go to a bank and get construction loans, and then I got to sell them and pay realtors. And before all that's done, like, it's been 10, 12-year cycle. I've weathered a complete economic disaster. And so, that's why I tell everybody, be very calculated in what you purchase, but invest for cash flow. That's what I tell everybody. And if you're later in life, invest for asset holding and wealth growth for, the long term, and taking care of your kids and tax shelter, that type of thing.
Yeah. Now, this is fascinating. It's cool. Like, it's such a powerful tool. Used right? It's such a powerful tool, because if you can get in with, instead of 20, 25%, 10%, or sometimes $0 of your own money, right? Capital is what's one of the main things that restricts all of us, right? But if you don't need as much capital to do deals, my God, it's a powerful tool. So I think that's really cool, and I appreciate you sharing all that. But as this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, I like to incorporate some wrestling-related real estate questions. So the first one is, what would your wrestling name be? If you picked a wrestling name for yourself, what would it be, you think?
It would probably be the Great White Shark. Just because I've always been fascinated with sharks, but everyone has this negative connotation of sharks, and I always look at, like, sharks. Sharks are pretty cool, man. Like, they're elusive, but when they need to attack and they need to get the job done, man, it's one of the most powerful, jaws that you can see in the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they're amazing. One of my bucket list things is to go in the cage with a great white shark. Actually, it's on my bucket list of things to do. That'll be an interesting one, that's for sure. Yeah. I also like the saying, like, do you know what sharks think of Mondays, or something like? Have you heard that saying?
Yeah.
You know what shark thinks of Mondays? Nothing. Sharks don't care that it's a Monday. They're too busy being a shark and killing shit, or something like that, right? I love that saying. That's an awesome saying. So every wrestler has a special move. It's their biggest strength. What would your special move be in real estate, you think?
Marketing. Gary Keller says it in, I think, his Red Book or somewhere. He said, you're in a business which is like 95% marketing and 5% transaction. And if you're really good at marketing and lead generating and building relationships, like, you're going to be, at the end, you're going to have the most opportunities. And so marketing, man, it's with a degree in advertising and those years of experience, just marketing, like, I can bust out a real estate investor marketing plan in like an hour in a Google Doc. So
awesome. Very cool. Very cool. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken in your real estate investing career?
That's a great question. When I left the brokerage in the Silicon Valley, I knew that there was potential to be upside. My wife wanted to, she was in the university business, and not to talk deep here, but she was working in, higher ed, and she wanted, like, she was at that point where she like had capped out in her job. And I was like, what do you want to do? Like, what's your next step? And she's like, I got to move. I got to relocate. I got to create opportunity, right? I got to dig up my roots and take it elsewhere. And I left like a 6-figure job with one of the best real estate brokers in the country. Just basically was like, hey man, I quit. Like, I'm moving to Oregon. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, because I knew there was a great relationship there. There was amazing potential. Like, I could have got my license and made $500,000 to $1 million a year selling luxury homes. But I knew if I could take care of family first and like support her when it was that time, I think that was a big turning point in our relationship with, I'll take 3 steps back so you can take 3 steps forward. And then now she's just been a wealth of support in terms of, I'm working 70 hours a week, and I tell everybody, I think I told you this when I first came on, I want to work 70 hours a week for 5 years and be done with this and only have cash flowing assets. That's it. And if, I know it's possible. And so it's just about setting that goal and being very methodical in it.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it?
It was in context of all of this, it's probably been a deal I passed up a couple months back. It would have been the largest purchase that I've ever made in terms of land. And I passed on the deal, and it was 19 lots in a really nice area of town. And, the price he wanted for it, the risk was just there. And I just was like, you know what, like I could find this money. I could use my private investor, but like, I'm going to have to tap this one out. Like, I can't do it. And I drove up there like 3 or 4 months later. It was all surveyed out. I was like, damn it. Somebody's going to get like 20 listings from this. And it was probably like a $2 million deal in profit. So yeah, that's been, you just got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them type thing. So.
Yeah, cool. Well, hey, Dan, this has been a fascinating interview, man. It's just like so interesting hearing about the owner financing. It's just such a great tool. I really, once you can learn to do that and figure out who to use it with, what kind of deals work with it, right? You just, just print and repeat almost, right? Just keep doing that over and over and over. So it really is a powerful tool. So I really appreciate you sharing all the information that you shared today. Yeah. But before we go, if people want to find out more about what you've got going on, or if they want to just reach out and get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so you can hit me up on Instagram. Oregon Relocation Expert is my IG handle. You can also reach out if you're a broker, realtor, property management company looking for, a new brand development, a new image, like marketing growth, some strategy. You can hit us up at liftoffagent.com. And then if you're an investor who's interested in the Oregon market and want to reach out, we're at eXp Realty. We're the exit agent team. Yeah, you can hit me up at 458-209-0163.
Cool. I'll put all that information in the show notes and the description below so people can check it out there. But yeah, Dan, thank you so much, man. Have an awesome rest of your day.
I appreciate it, man. Have a good one.